Purple Ella here and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm joined by the lovely Roz for this month's Autism in Company video, and this month we're going to be looking at social strategies. And you may have also noticed that we have some rather fetching headwear, or you may not have noticed, it's kind of subtle. Right?
I always wear this hat.
I always wear this hat, so if you haven't noticed before, why not? Anyway, that's because I would like you to think of the social strategies that we're talking about today as the ability to wear different hats for different occasions. So, this came about for me as a strategy one day in the children's school. So Super Kid was at the time in year 2 and aged about 6 or 7, and something had happened in his school that I was not happy with. I'm not going to go into what because for privacy reasons, but basically I became pretty enraged. And because I wasn't diagnosed with autism at the time and had no idea how to handle this kind of situation, I went charging straight from the situation which had stressed me out, maybe on the verge of a meltdown, into the headmistress's office and gave her hell. And luckily, rather than calling the police or some other probably completely appropriate response, she sat me down and she explained to me, let's call her Susie for the day. Her name isn't Susie, but let's call her that. She explained to me that in her life she plays many different roles. So she plays the role of head teacher, Susie. She plays the role of mum with children in another primary school that she engages with the other parents, Susie. She plays the role of Susie the friend who goes out with her mates and I'm guessing loosens up, whatever. Maybe she goes out partying, whatever. And you know, wife and family Susie. And that these are all, I'm sure there are many other subtle roles in between, but these are all roles that, not roles that she plays, but facets of her personality that she uses and levels of appropriateness that she uses in various different situations. And honestly, until she said that to me, I had never thought of it at all. I just went in, I just didn't know how to refine, how to handle different social situations differently, I guess.
I remember observing that people were different in different situations and being like, how? What?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
What are you doing? This isn't, I don't recognise you.
Who are you? Yeah, exactly. And I guess maybe I'd noticed that people were doing that, but I hadn't understood where it might be useful. So, yeah. Would you like to expand on that topic?
Yeah, I think
Roz?
I don't have as classic a story. I think it's something I slowly realised and then sometimes was like, that's just silly, I'll just be the same to everyone, and then realised, no, wait, this makes sense, it's useful in different situations to be different. And I think one of the things that I struggled with was being authentic at the same time. So for a while I thought, if I just act this way like a character I've read, act like a character I've read in a book. That was a classic one.
Yeah.
Like be like, today I am Anne of Green Gables and I'm going to act like Anne of Green Gables.
Yeah, you can't just live someone else's personality though, can you?
Work.
Turns out, especially not fictional characters.
No, because then you end up doing things and you're like, this isn't something I feel comfortable doing, but this is what the character would do, so I've got to full steam ahead.
I may have lived my whole life that way.
Yeah. And there's a real logic to that. You go, is it relevant to my work situation to talk about my sexuality, to talk about, that I got really drunk last night? Probably not. Unless certain work situations it is, like a cat, which is very difficult. So you can create blanket rules and then adapt them. That's what I found most useful. So I won't talk about this here, and then slowly adapt to how I felt most comfortable.
Well, I guess it's noticing in that situation. I just nearly fell off the chair. I guess we're so professional.
Yeah.
I guess it's noticing when that level of relationship is actually changing,
Yeah.
and it becomes appropriate to share, as in a work situation where you cross that line from colleagues into maybe more of a friendship.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What other situations are there?
So, I used to go into medical professionals or any kind of professionals, estate agents, any kind of professionals, and act like I was hanging out with my friend in the pub.
Yeah.
Which some people actually can be quite an effective way to get people on side, but is also a little bit of a risky strategy because it can freak people out.
Yeah, and it can make you more vulnerable because you've shared a lot of personal information with someone who, might be helping you get a house and might utilise... I mean, in worst case scenario, someone might utilise personal information you shared. Best case, oh yeah, they understand that and they understand that approach and they just treat you like a person. We all hope for that one.
Yeah. But sadly, that's not what always happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, I think there's a thing of kind of going away from, for me definitely, going away from these situations, feeling a little bit violated because, not violated isn't the right word because it wasn't taken.
Feeling overexposed.
Feeling overexposed, yeah. So it feels nice to privilege the people who are closest to you with the most privileged information.
Yeah.
And it's not even as straightforward as maybe just the information that you share. Do you think it gets into sort of the tone that you use and the...
Yeah. Yeah, the tone that you use and like how you, like what information you ask from them. Because a close friend, you're going to want more information of their personal life, whereas an estate agent, you're probably not going to want to know what they ate for dinner.
Yeah, exactly. And it wouldn't be appropriate to ask.
No.
And they might think you were a little bit strange. And and I always want to add this caveat to all the videos we make, although some of you might be feeling right now like, well, why should we be adapting our behaviour for different situations? We should be authentically autistic. And I would put it to you that everybody is doing this.
Yeah.
Neurotypical or not, everybody is, with lesser or greater ease and with lesser or greater success, trying to manipulate, if you like, their lives by dealing with people in ways that they have decided upon.
Yeah. And it just means that you are more comfortable in your relationships and you are being more authentic to yourself by only sharing the information that you want to or need to share in that situation, rather than just sharing it all or sharing none of it, because that's the other thing. You can, like, I got very... my selective mutism was a part of that, not knowing what information to share, not knowing what was relevant, and so just not sharing anything.
Yeah, and that's
not interacting with the world.
Upsetting, I guess.
Yeah, in some ways. But so I did behave differently around people I was closer with, even though I was selective mute. So that was the thing of adapting my behaviour, because I'd feel more comfortable and therefore would behave more like myself.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you've ever been that person who either has completely clammed up and felt unable to talk at all, or like me, you've gone into a party and ostracised yourself within 10 minutes by telling the first person you met your very deep, dark divorce story, then this might be a useful video for you, because I think next we're going to get into some strategies. Some tips. Top tips, top tips, top tips. So, you were talking about the sort of art of small talk.
The beautiful art of small talk. And I think a lot of people share this, especially those autistic people, hate small talk. Just like, I don't need this. But I've learned to love small talk.
Yeah, small talk. It has its place.
Yeah, because it's a chance for me to share all the weird stories or facts I have in my head, but at a small measure of them. Like a distilled, this is my story about the weather. I'll share it with you now because it's hot outside.
Yes, I've saved it for just this moment.
Just this moment. And I share it over and over again, and each telling gets slightly different. But I think small talk is about the concise nature of the story, and so it's being able to represent something in a very distilled moment and have a shared interaction with someone else, where you go, we're both people. Here's my story about how I'm a person.
Yes. So small talk is not sharing your opinion particularly. It's not trying to educate someone. It's not trying to develop a deep connection. It is how we interact with. It's how 80% of our day-to-day interactions go and what they're about, which is just like you said. You're a human, so am I. Yeah. Nice to meet you.
I've just thought of an example that happened in the supermarket where I bought myself some pigs in blankets and it wasn't Christmas, and I was just like, I'd suddenly discovered this. And the lady at the counter went, oh, my son really likes those. And I said, oh yeah, I've just discovered recently that you can buy these when it's not Christmas.
Great.
And it's changed my life. And she was like, excellent, so glad for you. We had a positive interaction where we shared small pieces of information about our lives that weren't very deeply personal, that we just meant, oh yeah, I went away from that being like, yes.
I think one thing that's really important to avoid when you're trying to do small talk is special interests. Don't, because you just won't be able to help yourself.
Yeah, you'll want to do the full spiel. Like, I've definitely had small talk instances where someone's gone down a route and I've been like, this is no longer small talk for me. I either need to leave or this needs to develop into a deeper conversation.
Yeah, so this morning, just this very morning, Wonder Girl did her very first ballet exam, proud mom, and I was sat next to another mom who was lovely, and we started, I don't know why or how, but talking about autism, just happens. And she was kind of going down the classic, so it's not, but in a really good and positive way. So you're saying it's not a spectrum with people at one end and the other, and asking lots of questions, and I just couldn't help myself. So she got the full training, and actually, why did I do that?
Yeah, I can't do small talk. People always try because they're like, oh, and I'm like, sit down and have a conversation with me about it, please, because otherwise I'll just spurt some words, and often I'll say stupid things because it's a special interest and I'm trying to distill it. I can't.
Yeah.
And I end up saying things and listening back and going, no, you didn't mean that.
Or you do end up having that full conversation, and let's face it, there are only so many of those conversations you can have in 1 week without becoming overloaded.
Yeah.
So if you end up getting sucked into a big full-on conversation with everybody that you meet,
it works your brain lots.
Yeah, and you're going to be tired.
And then you go back to your family and are like, I no longer have any words for you.
Yes, exactly.
All my words are gone.
Yeah. So and I should have saved it for you because you're my family.
That leads on very well
into the
inner and outer circle.
Yeah, so many years ago, in one of my phases of seeing psychiatrists, did an inner and outer circle diagram that I found really useful. And it's not as simple as an inner and outer, it's actually a very inner, a slightly, it's a circle with a bunch of circles.
I've done one of them.
Inside. And right in the middle, obviously, there's you. And then kind of around you, you've got your immediate family, and then you've got your closest friends, and so on and so forth until you got out to your postman.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm not going to go too much into specifically levels of relationship because I actually made a whole video about friendship in which I talked about levels of relationship, and I'm going to link to that. I might be fancy enough to link to it right now on the screen.
And I have a spreadsheet of the people I love most in the world.
Tell us more about your spreadsheet.
I'm very proud of my spreadsheet. It was at a point where I was really stressed and finding when I had a spare moment of time and I was like, I've got a weekend free, who should I see? I then in that moment would be reminded of all the people in my life that I liked that I hadn't contacted recently. And I was just like, and then I feel like a terrible person, and then I spend the weekend on my own doing nothing because there are too many people.
Yeah.
Too many, who's the priority? So I made the spreadsheet, so I wrote down a list, and there's, I think, about 25 of them, the people I love most in the world, and then colour-coded a system of how recently I had engaged with them and how, whether it was I'd send them a text and then two things of then what I needed to do, so that when I had a moment where I was like, I've got a weekend free, looked at the spreadsheet, who's on red, who's on orange, who's on green, and I can interact with someone who's on a green, that's fine. No
I was going to say, I must be on green semi-permanently at the moment because we've seen quite a bit of each other lately, haven't we? I mean, assuming I'm on the spreadsheet, I'm on the spreadsheet, right?
Yeah.
Good.
But doing that means that you have this real idea of who are the important people, who are the people that I want to put energy into engaging with.
And then you can put that level of relationship on those people, and then that kind of helps you to do the rest, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So what was our next thing we wanted to talk about?
Asking when you can share information of other people. So
yeah.
We talked a bit about sharing your own personal information, but one of the things that is important to remember is when you're telling stories about your friends, you're also sharing their personal information. And I got in some sticky situations when I was younger of sharing things that I thought were public knowledge in a friendship group that the person had told me in confidence.
Yeah, I've done that.
Yeah. And it's so easy to do because you're like, I'm so open about my life. Everyone
must be. And it's also great social currency because that's how neurotypical people communicate often, is about other people.
Yeah, it's like, my friend, my quirky friend who does this. And, I think everyone's experienced that moment where someone tells a story about you and you go, oh no, can you not hear?
Yeah.
Like, this isn't the relationship I have with these people. I don't have that relationship where I want them to know these personal details.
Yeah.
And so I learned to like check in if I was gonna, is that information you're happy, is that just between us? Is that information you're happy being shared?
So basically, to put this in a nutshell, what we're doing is we are looking at levels of relationship, deciding appropriate things to share with particular levels of relationship, and then equally that works the other way around.
Yeah.
And I think the final thing that we wanted to get into is the difference in how much time you might spend and what kind of tone you might use. So, for example, if I went into the doctor's where I am expected to be there for 10 minutes and started talking and didn't stop, that would be uncomfortable. Equally, if I went round to a close friend's house on a Sunday morning and was still there on Monday morning, that would be uncomfortable. So I think it is actually quite a good idea to keep an eye on the clock in these situations and to remember that often always leave them wanting more. And in terms of tone, this one is a really hard one to explain. Like the tone and the kinds of words that you would use, again, with a professional are different. I guess it's not swearing.
Yeah, not swearing.
Not using slang.
Yeah. It's a really hard one.
You just do speak differently,
Being
don't
more
you?
professional.
Being more professional, yeah. So, yeah.
Less casual in the way you use words, although... Like, I think there is a flexibility there to an extent, and I think it's about experimenting and seeing what feels right for you.
Yeah.
So, and I think you find when you act, I find when I act more professionally, I get a more professional response, and that makes me feel more like a professional, so it makes me feel more confident in my job.
Yeah.
Whereas when I, slip and act more casually, I then don't feel as professional, so it's more for me than it is for the other people. It's like, how do I feel like I'm interacting with this situation? Do I feel like I'm doing it, when I'm at work, I want to be professional.
Yeah. And I think, actually, something you said there about how it makes you feel more professional, that's actually the crux of it, because you are doing this for yourself. Ultimately, if you end up managing these relationships better, you come away from encounters feeling better.
Yeah.
And feeling less embarrassment and less judgment.
And feeling like you have been your authentic self. And also not expose parts of yourself you didn't want to. Like
you've been in control of your own boundaries and your own self, and that's a really satisfying feeling. And it's not something by any means that I achieve all of the time, or that anyone probably achieves all of the time. But it's definitely something that I'm striving for. So, and I think the same goes, just to add a final thing, in any other form of communication than verbal communication, in text messages, in emails, the same level of relationship needs to be considered. So sorry, I'm going to ramble on again. I once saw a programme about Spike Milligan, and I loved the fact that when he wrote to the BBC, he was completely casual and weird and was talking about fairies. And so I decided at the grand old age of whatever I was, 25, that I could get away with that, and started sending similar emails. And it didn't pan out for me because I am not Spike Milligan and I don't have a successful career already to rely on. So now when I send work emails or messages of any kind, or say messages to a parent that I'm dealing with because our children are friends but I don't need to really know them, I read the message back to make sure that the tone and what I've said is appropriate for that level of relationship. And that's actually a good place to start with this, because it's easier to control.
I also, when I first started writing emails, it's only recently that I've been able to send them on my own. Like, sent them to my mum, my friend, like a friend who I thought would be, good to look over, just to be like, can you just look over and see if what I've said sounds right? Because I often find myself saying the wrong thing. And I read, like, my friends read it back and go, you literally wrote the opposite of what you mean there. Why did you do that? And I'm like, because my brain doesn't work sometimes.
Yeah, and choosing, we could do a whole thing about emails. Anyway, I think we've probably covered enough for now. Thanks for joining me, Roz.
That's all right.
Lovely as always. And we will be back again next month, and I will be back again next week with topics which I cannot yet tell you. Won't that be exciting?
Mystery
topics. So, see you here next week. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, please give us a big thumbs up. And if you've not already, please do subscribe to my channel. Bye.
Bye.